The storm raged violently as John maneuvered his rusty pickup along the treacherous coastal road. Towering waves crashed relentlessly against the jagged cliffs, their roar mingling with the howling wind. As he drove, John eyed the towering form of the old clock tower up ahead, rising like a solitary sentinel amid the gloom. He pulled into the courtyard, tires skidding on the wet cobbles, and climbed hastily out into the downpour. Drawing his coat tighter, John surveyed the stark structure looming above with apprehension. The belfry windows gaped like empty eye sockets, staring down at him accusingly. An involuntary shiver passed through John that had nothing to do with the icy rain. A creak of rusty hinges announced his entrance into the cavernous foyer. John paused to let his eyes adjust to the Stygian gloom, senses on high alert. An oppressive silence hung in the air, broken only by the pattering of rain on the roof far above and his own shallow breaths. Shaking his head to dismiss such fancies, John got to work examining the mechanisms. As he worked, John began to feel an odd creeping sensation along his nape. He glanced up frequently, assaulted by a mounting irrational fear that ghostly eyes watched from the darkened balconies above. The shadows seemed to writhe and coil mockingly around the fluted pillars like eager predators. John redoubled his efforts, hoping to finish quickly and escape this accursed place. That's when he noticed it. A single hand on the massive clock face was turning backwards, against all logic and reason. John stared, paralyzed, as the minute hand slowed to a halt, then began rotating in the opposite direction with a sullen creak. Impossible. This could not be real. A terrible boom shook John from his stupor. His lantern clattered to the floor, plunging the foyer into absolute blackness. Panic clawed at his throat as he fumbled blindly, desperate to relight the flame. At last, a flickering glow illuminated swirling eddies of dust dancing in the draft. But the massive oaken doors stood closed, as if an invisible force had barred his way. John raced to the doors and pounded frantically, calling out until his voice grew hoarse. Nothing. He was trapped inside this grim citadel, with whatever nameless things lurked in the tower's bowels. Hot tears stung his eyes as the implications sank in. He would die here, alone and forgotten in this accursed place. A noise sounded from above, dragging him back from the brink of madness. Gripping the lantern like a talisman, John began to climb the twisting stairwell. With each step, the air seemed to grow heavier, charged with portents of malign intent. Gradually, the staircase narrowed, funneling him ever upwards into oppressive confinement. Strangling vines of ivy coated the walls, their shadowy tendrils closing in like barbed wire. At last, John emerged onto a balcony and froze in mute horror. Floating indistinctly in the gloom was a hideous tableau, a nightmarish assemblage of pale, screaming faces leering down from the stories above. Their eyes burned with a malevolent hunger, predatory and crazed. As John watched, paralyzed, one face slowly turned. Empty sockets gazed directly into his soul as bony fingers dragged across the dirt-caked glass. It knew he was there. They were coming for him. John backed away slowly from the balustrade, heart pounding wildly. Those soulless visages had truly seen him, and their demeanor bespoke murderous intent. As he retreated downstairs, the faces followed soundlessly above like wraiths. Every shadow now seemed alive with menace. John's lantern flickered frantically, mirroring his fraying nerves, yet provided scant comfort amid the suffocating darkness. Wind screamed through crevices in the masonry, conjuring phantasmal voices. John clasped his hands over his ears, yet could not block the cacophony invading his mind. Snatches of lyrics, woven an eldritch pattern, hinting at unseen terrors. Beneath bell tolls the dead. Come steal your soul. Tower, tomb, and crypt shall keep. Never rest, never sleep. Parching thirst and fatigue pulled John towards oblivion's brink. Had he finally crossed into madness within these cursed walls? No. He must go on and solve this damnable mystery or meet his end. John stumbled onwards through foggy recollection, following ghostly piano strains drifting from the upper stories. The music swelled to a crescendo of manic glee, then faded, as if beckoning him ever upwards into the belfry jaws. With a Herculean effort, John dragged himself up the final steps into a cavernous chamber. Here the music was loudest, its discordant tones scraping his raw psyche like sandpaper. At the melody's heart, he discerned a muffled keening, a collective wail of misery from beyond the veil. A flash of lighting blindingly illuminated the bell chamber. For a split second, John saw them, the spirits, hovering wraith-like amid the belfry gloom. Their faces were contorted into agonized masks, skin peeled back from grinning skulls. Tattered remnants of Victorian finery clung to emaciated forms suspended from great gibbet frames. As the thunder faded, the full horror coalesced in John's mind. He stood amid a charnel house of damned souls, tied irrevocably to their hellish demise. Only a trace of compassion for their plight allowed John to withstand the visceral terror a moment longer. Somewhere water dripped rhythmically, its maddening cadence synchronizing with the persistent music. Suddenly, a series of images assaulted John's mind with force of a bludgeon. Metal bars, rough hands, leering faces, crimson droplets in the rain. The spirits were showing him their cursed fate. As the screams of long-dead spectators echoed in his psyche, the truth became horrifically clear. These souls had been wrongly condemned for sins falsely alleged, then publicly hung as sport for a jeering mob. Even in death, they remained chained to the scene of their grisly sacrifice, reliving that trauma eternally. The music swelled into a demented crescendo, drowning out sanity. John understood he too would dissolve into madness if trapped here with these forsaken souls. One moment more. An idea came to him, a glimmer of hope amid the maddening chaos. He alone could set them free by learning their ignored names. "Please," croaked John desperately to the lingering spirits, "show me who you were, so I may give you peace." A vision flashed before him of crumbling documents within the clock tower's archives below. John had his purpose. As he descended once more into the crushing shadows, the spirits drifted behind soundlessly. Their fate and his own would be resolved amongst the sleeping truths of the past. Thanks for listening to this story. Put a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories.